What is going on, y'all? Gamers Goon here today, and by the time you are watching this, today is the day the Chicago Bears have returned to the field for preseason, and we are doing our 53-man roster projection. As we did last year, it's always fun to find some of the cool stories throughout camp and then through these preseason games, right? Last year, one of the guys that I'm not going to lie is probably like a Coleman Bennett in the red, right? Found his way all the way up into a top 53-man spot, Jade Walker, right? There's always opportunity. Just because you are in the red does not mean that you cannot get out of it. So, today I wanted to look at kind of what to look for in these preseason games, kind of the names that we're looking out for heading in, and kind of what it looks like right now heading into the season. First, we'll obviously talk about the quarterback spot. Caleb Williams, he is the guy. There's no question about it. There is some interesting stuff going on there at the QB spot, though. And I would argue a lot of that's because there's some QB needy teams still that could, not saying they will, could call for Tyson Bagent, right? He's somebody that we heard about in the offseason, had some interest. How is that interest going to pick up after some of these preseason games? And say, for example, I'm watching the Jets right now, and Geno Smith is injured. They say he's probably going to be good to go. But a team like that, right, that has some QB struggles, if Tyson Bagent plays well enough, is he a trade candidate heading into the season? You could get something for Tyson. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him. Case Keenum, I expect him to make the roster. He has the inwards track. That's why he's in the very light yellow here. I have him in over Miller Moss. I think they want the veteran leadership in the room. I think Case Keenum is a good voice to have in the locker room. And not to say it's impossible for Miller Moss to get in, right? He's a guy I think they want to keep on the practice squad and kind of develop into being, if there is a next Tyson Bagent like QB2 that they really trust. I think that they could be looking towards Miller Moss for that. But Miller Moss, I want to throw it out there. Open invitation. Tyson Bagent wasn't supposed to make the roster. Talk about Jade Walker last year. Tyson Bagent was not supposed to make the roster. He bumped PJ Walker down a peg, and Tyson Bagent ended up on this team. And here we are, where we're talking about Tyson Bagent possibly being good enough to start on another team, right? So just because you are in the red heading into the preseason games does not mean a thing. Don't take it as an insult. It doesn't mean a thing, right? Tyson Bagent's made it out. Miller Moss, maybe he can too, right? But Case Keenum, the one that is on alert there for that. And if Miller Moss really does show out, maybe the Bears are willing to move Tyson Bagent for a little bit cheaper, right? Because they do know that their QB2, Miller Moss, has a little bit of juice to him. Then we get to the running back position, and this is a position that we're starting to get some clarity on, obviously at the top two, but number 3 is the interesting one, right? I think Roschon Johnson, probably the guy with the inside track. Britton Brown, he's a guy that's floated around in terms of being on the Bears, a guy that we think we can get in. I think he even played a few games last season. I definitely know he was in the practice, or not on the practice squad, in the preseason roster. And then Salvon Ahmed is another guy that has been, he was on the Dolphins, right? You look at them coming on over. He's a guy that he can come in there. He's a decent pass catcher, right? Has some juice to him. He went to Washington, so I do have some beef with him for that. But Salvon Ahmed is somebody that has been a fairly productive running back when he has played. He hasn't got very many opportunities. I don't even know if he was really around the league last year, but he is a guy that is pretty solid, and I think he is another guy that kind of gives you something different at that running back spot, right? Because you look at Monangai and you look at Swift, right? Those guys are really good. They do a lot for you. Where you're kind of lacking is kind of the versatile pass catching back. Both of them can catch. Roschon Johnson's not going to be that for you. He hasn't been that to this point. But Salvon Ahmed is somebody that could potentially provide some juice there. And then the outside shot here, Coleman Bennett at UDFA, they went out and got. What is he able to bring to the table? We'll end up seeing here in the next few, I guess, in the next day during the game here tomorrow. Then we get to the receivers. You see Luther Burden with the star by his name. If you see any stars by the name, that's because they are injured, and we're kind of curious on what we're going to see. By the way, let me throw a star on Noah Stuhl's name. This is our injured list, by the way. Keyshawn Elliott, Kyler Gordon, Elijah Hicks, Kobe Bryant, 4 to 6 months. Noah Sewell, Ozzie Trapilla, he probably won't play this season. Shamar Turner, Luther Burden. We need to get healthy. That's a big thing. But Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Khalif Raymond, Ja'Day Walker, Xavier Thomas, I'll expect to be very, very safe, right? You look at what the Bears have done at the receiver position. Khalif Raymond, good veteran. He's a guy that played over there in Detroit, a guy that Ben Johnson obviously knows. I expect Ja'Day Walker to be fairly safe, right? Because this was a guy that had a role on last year's team. You saw him towards the end of the season start to have some big moments. I think back to that catch in the Green Bay game, right? But Ja'Day Walker's a guy that continued to get better and continued to push. And you see the guys that they brought in, and none of those guys really, to me, scream like Ja'Day Walker, watch out. And then Xavier Thomas, that's a guy that you used a third-round draft pick on. That's a guy that you obviously have a lot of high hopes for. And then we've seen, obviously, Ben Johnson as a coach likes to use some guys in some gadget roles. Xavier Thomas definitely fits the bill there. So he's somebody that might not be used a lot in his first year, but a guy that I think Ben Johnson will use as a chess piece. You definitely should expect him to make the 53-man. Now, the rest of the receiver group is kind of interesting, right? I'll be interested to see if they maybe keep an extra receiver with Luther Burden being kind of banged up heading into the season. This is where you can kind of have some give and take with some of these injuries, right? If you don't fully trust Luther Burden's going to be 100%, that might knock you down at a different spot because you're more worried about the receiver spot, right? You might be like Rome Odunze, Khalif Raymond, Ja'Day Walker, Xavier Thomas isn't enough. We need two more guys, two more in that room because we're worried about Luther Burden, right? And we're not fully confident in those the remaining three to hold up. And that's where you could start to see some. I mean, I have them. Well, actually, I'll wait to tell you how many I have. But this is where you get to kind of see what the team is viewing as their areas of weakness, right? Because most teams could probably get by with a decent receiving core, but Luther Burden being down, how much of a concern? Do they keep two more of these guys? Do they only keep one or more of these guys? Because I know Luther's going to be back. That's going to be kind of some give and take here heading into it. But you got Ray McLeod, who obviously they just brought in. He's a guy that's been around the league. I think he was last on Atlanta. But he's a guy that is fairly solid veteran to have in the room. Caden Davis, he's a guy that, believe it or not, I haven't known much about, but his name has been popping up in camp left and right. He's somebody to watch out for. And then Scotty Miller, a guy that I thought was relatively safe to make the roster as kind of that sixth receiver, but with Ray McLeod coming in, with Caden Davis coming in and making some noise in camp, Scotty Miller is kind of on the outs there. Is he going to make it into that final spot if they were to keep 6? Maybe they keep 7 and he's one of them. Assuming Luther Burden will be ready to go. Obviously, if they put him on the PUP list or the IR or whatever, then that does give them an extra 2 spots. But we'll see really here with Scotty Miller if he can end up going in there. And then Maurice Alexander is a guy that I didn't want to necessarily put in the complete Reds category. Not to say the complete red category is like you have no chance. It's just guys that I think have a very long shot. Maurice Alexander, I think, is a little bit better than that. He's a guy that has played on this team in the preseason before, has looked solid in the preseason before. But like I said, when you have Scotty Miller, Ray McLeod there, 2 veterans, Caden Davis making the most noise out of kind of the remaining receivers there at a camp, I'm not really expecting Maurice Alexander to come in and get that job, but I wouldn't be super surprised if it were to happen. Next, we get to the tight ends, and I would hate to be a tight end on the Bears because there's 3 locks, and I don't know that the Bears are going to keep 4. But they have some decent options if they do keep 4, right? Hayden Large, he's kind of the fullback tight end combo. I think he would be an interesting guy to keep. It'll be interesting to see how they deploy him in the game tomorrow. Steven Carlson, he's a guy that's floated around on the Bears for a while. It's bounced back and forth between the practice squad, getting some time up on the main roster. Nikola Kalinic, another guy that some people do like, and then Kadir Ismail there in that tight end room to round it out. Like I said, the Reds like the deep red colors with Kalinic and Kadir Ismail are guys that I think are long shots. Not saying it's impossible, right? But it's gonna be an uphill battle, especially when Steven Carlson's been one of those guys that have been in that spot, right? And he's kind of been back and forth between the practice squad. Can you get over a Steven Carlson? Can you go over a very interesting player like a Hayden Large that can kind of give you some flexibility as a fullback? But yeah, it's a really tough room to get in here because I think it's probably the best tight end room in the NFL. You got Colston Loveland, who I'd argue is probably a top 5 tight end in the NFL after year one. Cole Kmet, who is probably one of the best complementary tight ends, and on his own was still a top 10, top 15 tight end. You have him with Loveland, and then obviously you have Sam Roush, who you went out and got. Another guy that's just a big time kind of threat there as well. So it'll be interesting to see that tight end room, but it's going to be tough to break in. Would hate to be the one to have to break into it. So good luck to those guys that aren't in the top 3 in that tight end room. Offensive linemen, this is going to be a fun kind of musical chairs, huh? I think there's 6 relatively comfortable: Darnell Wright, Joe Thuney, Braxton Jones, Jonah Jackson, Garrett Bradbury, Logan Jones. All those guys, pretty much safe. Braxton Jones, I expect to be the starter. I'll say it here and now. I expect Braxton Jones to be the starter. I have him in the green. I know there's been some talk about Braxton not making the roster, or, well, being traded or whatever, but them bringing back Braxton, I expect him to be there. Jedrick Wills, I think he is another one, right? He's going to be in competition with Braxton Jones. He's another one that I do lean towards having the inside track of being on this roster. And then you have Theo Benedict and Jordan McFadden. Both guys I expect the Bears to kind of favor on this roster as well. You look at Theo Benedict, he's a guy that they spoke very highly of. And then Jordan McFadden, a guy that they leaned on during the playoffs. And then the next category, I'm going to be honest, they're all in the red because I think all 3 of them are competing for the same spot, right? I think the Bears will probably keep more than what I've highlighted. And yeah, I think one of the next group, Luke Newman, Caden Barnett, and Karan Amagaju will be there. Luke Newman, obviously, they drafted him. Karan Amagaju, they drafted him. Caden Barnett, UDFA. So it's going to be a battle there for that last spot there. And then Mason Murphy, Jaron Kumpf, Kyle Hergel, and Wesley French. I have them all on the outside looking in. But like I said, I do think there's some spots, right? I do think there's some spots to break in. So we'll see. We'll see. Sorry, I'm getting a little sore throat. Next, we get to the long snapper, Bo Gardner. They already booted his competition. Bo Gardner will be the long snapper for the Bears. Defensive line, the Bears probably have like the best defensive line. I'm kidding. Calm down. The Bears, I am well aware of the Bears' struggle on the defensive line. But Montez Sweat, Austin Booker, Dio Adangbo, Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter, all those guys should be signed, sealed, and delivered, right? Those guys, you expect them to be there. You're hoping for a big jump out of Dio Adangbo. Austin Booker, we saw it in flashes. Can he put together a full season, a full healthy season even? Montez Sweat, you want to see him kind of get back to what he was a couple years ago. Grady Jarrett, can you provide something as that big-time signing in the defensive tackle position? Javon Dexter, kind of the pass rushing side of that at the defensive tackle position. And then you're kind of looking at the rest of this group, and once again, it's kind of like after the offensive line locks, it's kind of some musical chairs, right? You have a kind of an interesting group here with Jordan Vandenberg, Kentavious Street, Neville Gallimore, and Daniel Hardy. I don't think all of them will make it. I do think there's going to be a couple of them that will. Jordan Vandenberg, obviously, they went out. They got him at the back end of the 6th round. They really liked him. They were okay missing on some of the defensive linemen in that draft because they thought real highly of this kid, right? Guy that they thought went under the radar, tested really well, right? What can he bring? Kentavious Street and Neville Gallimore, both guys that have been around the league for quite some time. Veterans that will be in the room if they do end up sticking. Neville Gallimore actually does add some pass rush juice, so we'll see if he can maybe stick. Daniel Hardy, he's a guy that's been around on the team for a while, adds some special teams value, expect him to be in the mix as well. And then don't count out Jaden Loving. He's a guy that I think is actually not that unlikely to make the roster. I have him in the red because I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee that he's going to be even considered. But he is a guy that, I mean, once again, similar to Jordan Vandenberg, tested really well. Played pretty solid football there at Wake Forest. He's a guy that might be able to maybe make some noise during camp and during the preseason games and find his way onto this team, right? It's gonna, like I said, this defensive line room is gonna be some musical chairs going on. But we'll see if Jaden Loving can get in there. And then James Lynch, I do have in the darker red. I think it's a long shot because I do think the Bears probably would lean towards Kentavious Street or Neville Gallimore. But James Lynch, another veteran, adds a good voice in the room, at least for the preseason. And then John Marie Croma and Jeremiah Martin, I both expect to probably be on the practice squad. Not guys that I have high expectations for just yet. Linebackers. Obviously, linebacker was an issue spot for the Bears. They went out and got Devin Bush. As you can see, he is a lock for the roster. TJ Edwards obviously will be on this roster if he does not get traded. I don't expect him to. DeMarco Jackson, after last year, I think he earned a locked roster spot. And then Keyshawn Elliott. You went out and drafted him. You're gonna have him on the roster. And then it's kind of, once again, some musical chairs to round out this linebacker room. Jack Sanborn, a guy that's been in the Bears room before. Solid linebacker. Not getting a lot of national love in terms of the NFL, but I think you look at him and he's a guy similar to DeMarco Jackson, that he's just a good player. He might not wow you. He might not ever be like an LB1, but he's just a solid linebacker. Noah Sewell, obviously they drafted him a few years back to be a really solid linebacker, and he's kind of done it in spurts. Had some injury concerns. Injured once again. We'll see what he can do. Had a good preseason last year. Maybe he does it again. And then Tony Fields. That's a guy that's bounced around in the league a little bit, but another veteran. I actually do like Tony Fields' chances to make the roster. Then you have Ruben Hippolyte, who, once again, last year's draft pick. They wanted him to come in and have some special teams versatility. Don't know if we're going to get that out of him. I think that's really going to have to be what he proves if he were to make the roster. And then the rest of the group. Nephi Sewell will probably go to the practice squad if Noah Sewell sticks around. John Radigan, I doubt he makes it. Wayne Matthews, don't know much about him. Cornerbacks, we got Jalen Johnson, Malik Muhammad, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson. I think all those guys are locks. Obviously, Kyler, the Bears kind of getting frustrated. He's always hurt. Tyreek Stevenson, obviously, a lot of Bears fans get frustrated with him. I think both those guys are still locks. You can't cut them. Terrell Smith, Josh Blackwell, Jalen Jones. I think there's some spots open there for them to fight for. Terrell Smith coming off injury. Josh Blackwell, obviously your special teams ace. And Jalen Jones, also pretty good at the cornerback position, especially if you have him as your CB6. Just absolutely a blessing for the Bears, and part of why their secondary's actually been pretty solid. Beanie Bishop, I want to keep him kind of in that spot of has a better than long shot chance. He's a guy that played some solid football throughout his career, but once again, don't have huge expectations for him. And then you have the remaining of the DBs. Dante Manning, Marlon Sewell, William Wright, Anthony Johnson. Guys, good luck. Good luck. I hope you guys show out. And if you don't earn a spot on the Bears, remember, you can earn it somewhere else as well. But that DB room will be interesting to follow, especially with Kyler Gordon being an issue with injury. Safety, we have Dylan Thieneman, Xavier Woods, who we just signed, Cam Lewis, and I'm going to throw Elijah Hicks in there as a very strong possibility as well. Skylar Thomas, good luck making it in, but he's another UDFA that will be fighting for a roster spot heading into the season. And then you got the special teamers, Cairo Santos and Torrey Taylor, rounding it out there. So with that being said, let's get to what the 53-man looks like, right? So obviously you have some guys in the green, QBs. What ultimately, how many of each am I going to keep? Here we go. The Bears are going to keep 3 quarterbacks. I am going to keep Caleb Williams, Tyson Bagent, and Case Keenum. And if they are in yellow, that means I think those spots are open. With the QBs, realistically, it should probably be this. The only reason Tyson Bagent is yellow, in terms of my grade on him, is because what if he gets traded, right? And there's not a high likelihood he is getting traded, but it is a thought that's still floating around. Is like, well, there's still some teams that are. I mean, you look at a team like perhaps, like I said, the Jets, or here's another one, the Falcons. The Falcons too didn't look good today. Are there going to be teams calling for him? So Tyson Bagent's kind of the one spot that I would argue we might even make Tyson Bagent's color just different, because it's a spot that is locked if he's on the team, but if not, but I do think the Bears keep 3 QBs. So ultimately, Case Keenum, the one that I think has the most to prove in this group. Tyson Bagent would not be fighting for the 53-man spot. He would be fighting to stay on the Bears or potentially to start somewhere else. But so that's not really a spot I think is up for grabs, right? Because if he were to get traded, Miller Moss would be on this team. Running backs, I'm going Swift, Monungai, and Roshan Johnson. I am leaning Roshan Johnson. This could very easily be Salvin Ahmed. I'm giving Roshan Johnson the benefit of the doubt. He's been here. He was a guy they wanted on this team. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He seems to stick around. I'm going to go with him. Receivers, I got Rome, Luther, Khalif Raymond, Ja'Day Walker, Xavier Thomas. I went Ray McLeod. I think Ray McLeod kind of gives you something here, right? Especially if Luther Burden's going to start the year down and banged up a little. Ray McLeod gives you some slot ability. He's a guy that can play the outside. And I think you really necessarily need on the outside. A little bit smaller, but Ja'Day Walker, Rome Odunze, hopefully if Luther Burden are healthy, right? Khalif Raymond, Xavier Thomas, Ray McLeod kind of operate in the similar kind of mid to short range part of the field. Guys that I think could be there. So Ray McLeod is going to be who I lean with, because you're kind of really banking on Ja'Day Walker and Rome Odunze being your big guys on this team. So I'm gonna lean Ray McLeod. Very easily could be one of the other guys, though. I don't think Ray McLeod necessarily has the best like guarantee of making this roster, but I think they brought Ray McLeod in for a reason, and that's because they see value in kind of some of his skill set. I am keeping 3 tight ends. None of them are up for grabs. Colston Level and Cole Kmet and Sam Roush. Like I said, hard tight end room to get to. It'd be interesting to see if maybe they bump down a running back or a receiver to maybe get like a Hayden Large who can do a little bit of both. It'd be interesting, but I'm not leaning that way right now. Offensive linemen, we are going to keep 10 of them. Darnell Wright, Joe Thuney, Garrett Bradbury, Braxton Jones, Jonah Jackson, and Logan Jones, all locks for my roster. I do have Jedrick Wills, Theo Benedict, and Jordan McFadden being more likely than not locks as well. So these spots are open. And this is my wild card here. Caden Barnett. I gave the last offensive lineman spot to him, Karan Amagaji. Obviously, he's had some injury concerns. Hasn't looked great when we have seen him. Hopefully, you can get what you wanted out of Karan Amagaji, which was a starting tackle. But there's no guarantee you're getting that at this point in his career. So I am leaning Caden Barnett right now. Defensive linemen, I believe we're keeping 9 of them. But we have a decent group here. Montez Sweat, Austin Booker, Dayoud Angbo, Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter. Shamar Turner is in there. Once again, injuries maybe bounces him from this. Might be in the PUP list, whatever. But I do think Shamar Turner, if he is healthy, is in this group. And then my 2 kind of wild cards are Jordan Vandenberg and Neville Gallimore. I expect both to make the roster. I think those spots are open, though. Like I said, loving somebody that could come in and get it. For Gallimore, I think Kentavious Street is a player for it. And then Daniel Hardy, I'm leaning towards being a roster lock. I made him, once again, kind of a different color than everybody else, because I think he really is going to lock in as one of the special teamers that come in. Linebackers, like I said, TJ Edwards, Devin Bush, DeMarco Jackson, Keyshawn Elliott, all guys I expect to be there. And then I went Jack Sanborn. Like I said, I like Jack Sanborn. I think he's just a solid linebacker. Once again, might not ever be number one, but I think he is a really solid linebacker. And then I went Tony Fields for the veteran leadership, but also because you've had some injury concerns with Noah Sewell. Maybe you try to move him via trade. Maybe outright cut him. I don't know. Would hate to see him go because obviously I'm an Oregon fan, but I'm leaning Tony Fields at this moment for that last linebacker role. Corners, we go Jalen Johnson, Malik Muhammad, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson. Like I said, those guys are all locks. And then I went Terrell Smith and Josh Blackwell. I know Terrell Smith probably the one looking in from the outside right now behind Jalen Jones, but I'm gonna go ahead with Terrell Smith. When he did play 2 years ago, I liked him, so I'm gonna go with Terrell Smith. See what he has in this preseason. And then our safeties, we have Dylan Thieneman, Xavier Woods, Cam Lewis. They are locks, and obviously Elijah Hicks. His spot's up for grabs because Elijah Hicks has never really necessarily impressed me, but they really don't have much depth at that safety position, and I don't know if Skylar Thomas is going to beat Elijah Hicks out. And then, like I said, special teamers, those guys are all locked. Bo Gardner, Cairo Santos, and Torrey Taylor. Shout out to all of them, but that's going to be a lock from there. Anyways, thank you for watching. Let me know down below who you think the Bears' dark horse candidate is to make the roster. I don't want to know that you think... who can I say? That Neville Gallimore is going to make the roster. No, give me a Ja'Day Walker type take. Be like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that Omari Kelly makes it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that Nikola Kalinic makes it, right? Go ahead and tell me your wildest 53-man roster take. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the other side of the game.